Kalani Sitake might be the most unique coaching suggestion to UCLA, but he'd be a good hire. But a good fit? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of Locked On UCLA. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxheimer, joined by Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars, the BYU edition. Thanks for making the show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast and it's available on YouTube. Welcome back, everydayers. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, Jake, as we've been doing all the coaching searches, the candidates, if you will, is this guy the fit? What's the storyline coming to UCLA? And also, what are his strengths and weaknesses? And will this realistically happen? We'll dissect all of that in today's show. So, Jake, thanks for coming on. Tell every UCLA fan about Kalani in a couple minutes. What is there to like about him?
If there is a more personable coach who builds legit, real relationships with people that can do nothing for him, I'd like to meet them. Kalani Sitake is about as personable a person as you're going to find. He's genuine. He's caring. And the best part about him, Zach, is this is a guy who loves football. That beyond the fact that he's a personable individual, he loves football. It's a game that he absolutely adores, and he's dedicated his life to it. So that, in a nutshell, should explain what Kalani Satake is all about, because I absolutely think the world of this guy as BYU's head coach.
It's interesting, right? Because you had ESPN kind of, everybody's going to throw out their own little, everybody. And ESPN threw out Kalani, and I'm like, really? Like, that's his alma mater. That's where he played. That's where he's now coaching in now his 10th season. He's had a lot of success building from last year. Were you surprised when his name came out, or is he maybe looking to take that next leap?
I don't think he's looking to jump to another job. I'm going to be very blunt about that right up front, but I'm not surprised he's mentioned, because here's the deal with Kalani. He has put together 3 10-win seasons in the past 5 years alone, and that success at BYU, no matter, even if they're in the Power 4 now as a member of the Big 12 Conference, there are still those. You mentioned ESPN. I know that The Athletic also put him in their article of coaching candidates for UCLA in the aftermath of Deshaun Foster's firing. It's because of the success that he's had in Provo, and the reputation of BYU is that it's a lesser than program in a lot of people's eyes, and that's why his name continues to come up. But I'll be very clear up front. I don't think Kalani's got wandering eyes. I think he's very content doing what he's doing in Provo, because he's built quite a program for himself.
And here's the funny thing, Jake. You mentioned that there's this thought that maybe BYU is a lesser program. Well, if you've read everything about UCLA from The Athletic, you would think UCLA is the worst job in the country in a Power 4. I just did a show about how the optics are bad, but it's fixable. Is UCLA a step down for Kalani? Let's be real. Hurt UCLA fans. Be blunt and honest. Is that a step down for him?
At this juncture, yes. And now I say that because the history of UCLA is elite. Come on, you play in the Rose Bowl, everybody. That alone says what the history of UCLA has. But the last 2 decades, UCLA's been an afterthought. And I hate to say that to UCLA fans, but the simple fact of life is BYU's in a spot right now where they look like they're on the cusp of competing for the Big 12 title, playing in the college football playoff. How far away is UCLA right now from that? It seems like they're pretty far down. And as I understand it, and you probably could clarify this for me, Zach, they've run up a deficit of more than $200 million in athletics over the past 5 to 6 years. That sounds like a recipe for a long-term fix that I don't think coaches of Kalani's status are willing to take on at this juncture in their head coaching career.
And now you can kind of inform us, Jake, what's BYU's financial situation? Doesn't seem like they're hurting for money from basketball to football. Is that just a myth? What is that? And kind of clarify that for us.
So here's the deal with BYU. BYU is a university that the university itself will never fund athletics. There is money not going from main campus to BYU athletics. They've always had to, I use the term all the time, eat what they kill. So they had to fundraise, build up their reserves in terms of their overall athletic department. And for many, many years before BYU got into the Big 12, they operated with smaller budgets than some G5 programs, it felt like in some circumstances. But to their credit, they overachieved relative to that. But since they have joined the Big 12 Conference, they've got more money coming in media rights deals. With the advent of NIL, transfer portal, and the like, BYU's kind of unshackled all of their donors who have got some pretty deep pockets. I think a lot of people think of guys like Ryan Smith, who owns the Utah Jazz and the Utah Mammoth. He's a multi-time billionaire that is very engrossed in BYU athletics and wants nothing more than to see BYU succeed. They've got multiple guys of his ilk who are willing to fund BYU athletics and at least put money into the pot when it comes to NIL to attract talent and the like. So, yeah, quite frankly, BYU is in a very, very good situation financially because they don't operate in the red. They do not debt fund. They cannot do that. The university will not allow that to happen. So they operate in the black, and that means BYU is in a far better place than most athletic departments, UCLA or otherwise.
And here's the thing, right? 2015, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was when they're still an independence at BYU, and then they've transitioned. So kind of inform, all of us how Kalani's been able to transition from independent to Big 12 and just become almost a powerhouse in college football, a team that you're like, BYU's on the schedule. That's not an afterthought. That's a game.
Well, here's the thing. He learned at the foot of one of the masters in this sport. UCLA fans will be very, very familiar with Kyle Whittingham at Utah. Kalani spent more than a decade as his defensive coordinator up there in Salt Lake City. And the one thing you always say about Utah that's translated to BYU is they are a physical brand of football. You are going to feel BYU. You're going to feel Utah when you play them. I know UCLA saw that in the very first game of the year earlier this season. And that's what Kalani's prided his program on. He wants to beat you up in the trenches. He wants to run the ball down your throat. And it's just a physical brand of football that fits well right now in the Power 5 ranks because there's a lot of teams out there like to get by on finesse. And Kalani's like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to run it down your throat and make sure that you played BYU.
And here's the other thing, too. Would you say that Kalani right now is the most, if not one of the most underrated coaches in the sport? Nobody talks about him because you think he's going to stay at his alma mater, but is that a guy who's going to get taken by some other school somewhere down the line if it's not UCLA?
He's had overtures made to him before, absolutely. And I do think he is underrated in what he's accomplished because, like I said, 3 10-win seasons in the past 5 years, that gets overlooked, it feels like, too often by even BYU fans themselves. He's had incredible success, as you mentioned, transitioning from the independent era now to playing a Power 4 schedule. BYU's never played this level of football until the past 3 years. They went 5-7 the first year. They bounced back with an 11-2 record this past season. And then, oh, by the way, you lose your starting quarterback in the offseason. All you've done is replace him with a true freshman who is from Murrieta, California, down there in the Temecula area, and all he's done is lead BYU to a 3-0 record already in a top 25 ranking. Things are pretty good in Provo right now.
They're pretty good. I mean, I can't say the same thing about Westwood and Pasadena for UCLA, but hey, let's dive in to what are Kalani's strengths. Is it recruiting? Is it the toughness that you just touched on, Jake? And are there some weaknesses? Every coach has them. So let's talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. This episode is brought to you by Square, your favorite neighborhood spots. They run on Square, and there are certain businesses that can make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's the local sports bar that's packed on game days, the coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or even the corner deli that's been serving the community for decades. Here are the places that bring the people together. And when neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. And if you've been around LA and you're like, what's a good hot chicken place? Especially like a Nashville hot chicken place. Howlin' Ray's is the place where if you're not there early, you're going to be waiting for a long time. And let me tell you, it's worth it. I've gotten there way, way too early. And every time the hour-long wait is good. And you're going to want to check it out. It's a hidden gem, and go check it out in Los Angeles. So Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/LockedOnCollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. We'll see you in the neighborhood. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel more like a battle itself. The endless queues, the hidden prices, the fees, jumping at checkout. You're like, what's going on with this? You're trying to reload, you're refresh. Like, why can't I get my tickets? Well, that's why I use GameTime, the app that gives the advantage back to you, back to me, back to everyone, the fans, because it's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. So if you're like, you're debating prices, we all do. You're like, man, GameTime's got a great last-minute deal to go to a game especially if you want to go like a playoff game with the Dodgers right now with plenty coming up, you're going to want to go use GameTime. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download GameTime today. Diving into Kalani Sitake's strengths and weaknesses. So, Jake, let's go right into it. What would you say beyond just the transition from independent to Big 12, lots of wins? What are his strengths? Is it that physicality? Is that Kyle Whittingham? Has that philosophy rubbed off on him? Recruiting? What is it?
I will say the one thing I love about Kalani Sitake, it's going to go to recruiting here right at the outset, is that he has made a career on bringing in 2- and 3-star talents to BYU and essentially getting 4- and 5-star production from them. Now, that may sound familiar for UCLA fans because you think back to the Chip Kelly era. Chip was a guy that, from my vantage point up here in Utah, I routinely heard from people saying, why doesn't he recruit 4- and 5-star guys? Well, Chip saw value in guys who maybe were a 2- and 3-star guy and said, you know what? He's better than that 4-star that other people are recruiting. I'm going to bring that guy. I'm going to get the most out of him. And they had some pretty good success down there in Westwood with that philosophy. So I do think that Kalani's ability to bring in good talent and make it elite, but even with the proximity to recruiting Southern California, say he were to take that job at UCLA, he could bring in more 4- and 5-star talents. And obviously he's proven he can do really elite things with 2- and 3-star guys. Give him some more 4- and 5-star talents, and good times could be rolling for them. I think that's one thing that gets overlooked in his run at BYU is that ability to recruit maybe undervalued or overlooked guys and get the most out of them.
And my thing is UCLA is a unique spot, right? Because you look at USC, guys might want to go there. They can get more money there, but UCLA's got its own beautiful campus, more beautiful campus than USC. I can't say that's the same UCLA compared to Provo. They're both beautiful campuses, beautiful places. But what's the challenges of recruiting BYU? I know UCLA, it's academic based, maybe not the same financial, if that's truly the case. What's BYU's challenges that makes them such a good recruiter to navigate around that?
Well, the biggest, impediment and also strength in my mind is BYU's honor code. Now, every university out there has a student code of conduct, but BYU's far more stringent. I think most people out there have probably heard of BYU's honor code. No premarital sex, no drinking, no drugs. Like, there are so many things that a lot of guys go to college and get involved in that are just absolute no-goes at BYU. That's why Jake Retzloff left BYU this summer, is because he had premarital sex, had a lawsuit filed around it, and had to leave the university after facing a pretty lengthy suspension. So BYU doesn't mess around with its rules, and that can be both an impediment, but also can be a strength. There are guys out there who want to go to a university where the distractions that I just mentioned aren't a thing, and you can just stay away from them. You can focus on ball, focus on school. BYU is also pretty stringent academically. I know that UCLA, they absolutely value academics. And I can tell you, Kalani Sitake, there's one thing that I value about him. He's a builder of men. And that's an easy term to use with every coach out there, but look at his players that have played for him at BYU, and you kind of pay attention to what they've done once the sport ended for them, whether they played in the NFL or college was as far as they went playing the sport. They end up becoming really good men, get good degrees from BYU. Some of them get master's degrees and the like, and they go out to be a good force in the world. I think that's something that you can value as a head coach at UCLA, if you're a Bruin fan, is a guy who's going to come in and be a culture builder. That's the other thing about Kalani. He's very big on culture, and it took him some time. It might be one of his weaknesses as well, that it took him time to kind of hone in on what he wanted the culture to be and fully implement it at BYU, because he had some early struggles in that regard in his first few years at the helm in Provo. But once he got it instituted and once it's kind of taken root, like I said, 3 10-win seasons in the last 5 years, that's not nothing.
And the other thing, too, is if you look at UCLA's most recent coach, Deshaun Foster, his 3 pillars were discipline, respect, enthusiasm. Well, that got torn to shreds if you read the article about The Athletic, from Bruce Feldman, Ira Gorawara, where they combined to talk about, hey, Deshaun was getting, I think, blasted by sources that he wasn't up to snuff in terms of making everybody follow that code. So it's important that a guy like Kalani, you can say it's cliche, he's a builder of men, making them from almost boys from high school into men or from wherever they're coming, whatever walk of life. And then you got like a guy like Deshaun who means well, but it's a difference to say it. It's a different thing to mean it. And it's one final thing to actually make that happen. And it seems like that's what Kalani does.
Yeah, he absolutely does. Here's the thing. He's a no-nonsense guy, but he absolutely loves his players. If you want a feeling for who Kalani is, if you're a UCLA fan, go watch in the fourth quarter of their game against East Carolina this past Saturday. I'm sure if you have a video on demand feature, whatever streaming service or cable package you have, go watch in the fourth quarter. One of BYU's cornerbacks, Trey Alexander, got called for taunting, and Kalani Sitake went after him. We're talking like running down the sideline, barking. I'm like, what are you doing? And after he kind of chided him for taking that penalty, which was a boneheaded decision on Alexander's fault, on Alexander's part, I should say, Kalani then put his arm around him and said, hey, I still love you. That's what I love about Kalani is he will make sure that you know that you're not living the standard or standards he has got in his program. But at the same time, he's willing to put his arm around you and say, hey, I know you screwed up. I still love you. And we're going to be better for it going through this experience together.
All right, we're going to dive into it. Game management, X's and O's. How does that work with Kalani? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What is that like?
It's something that I thought was a weakness early on in his career is game management, but he has brought in coaches around him with hires like Jay Hill, who's associate head coach, a former head coach at the FCS level, and his
at Weber State, right?
Weber State, correct. And by the way, you want another candidate that UCLA should consider? Jay Hill. That's an aside there because Jay is absolutely electric as a coach. But he's brought in coaches around him who have kind of helped lighten that burden on him. And he's also gotten more aware in game of when to take timeouts, understanding how, clock management and the like. So it was a weakness early on in his tenure in terms of the understanding where you are in a game, down in distance, how to manipulate the clock and the like. But it's become a strength in recent years. So the one thing I guess I can say about Kalani is he's really transformed some of those weaknesses into key strengths, but it has taken him some time. I think it was a trial and error process, but to his credit, he found a way through all of that.
And some coaches get the opportunity, right? You see Deshaun, 15 games. That's clearly not enough time, but it was clearly enough time to see that UCLA was in disaster. It was time to literally just blow it all up and start with a clean slate. And for UCLA, it's like, man, Deshaun, he couldn't figure it out. There are some things that weren't there from game one. But sometimes you need a coach with time to develop, and that's where it's a good thing for a guy like Kalani, who's been at the same spot 10 years. He's been trying to get pulled. He's been in transition with the new conference realignment age, conference reaffiliation stage, whatever you want to call it. And he's basically put his team into CFP contention and handle that drama. So those are all good things. Is there any weaknesses off the top of mind other than dealing with the culture and the game management that he hasn't fixed? Or do you think he's grown from his early weaknesses?
So I mentioned at the outset of today's podcast, he's a very personable individual. Well, he is loyal to his guys to a fault. And what I mean by that is Elisa Tuiaki came to BYU with Kalani and was his defensive coordinator. Well, they had some decent success on defense in his early run at BYU. But when things fell apart, he essentially held on to Elisa despite what I think many on the outside were saying, what are you holding on to this guy for? And the loyalty to Elisa I think cost BYU almost an entire season, if not more than that. So the loyalty to his guys can be a concern I would harbor if he was at UCLA, even if he's in Provo right now. I think he learned a hard lesson with that because, as I mentioned, Elisa was one of his best friends, quite literally both on the field and off. They were thick as thieves. And that loyalty, I think, cost BYU in some regards. It absolutely set them back in recruiting. I can say that because Elisa was not up to snuff recruiting top-tier defensive talent. Jay Hill, luckily, has come in and kind of turned that around in very short order. But that loyalty to his guys, I think, can be a fault that can be shouldered by Kalani.
And I think UCLA, they kind of need a culture builder, but they also need like a cutthroat guy who can come in and be like, we're not dealing with the nonsense, which is kind of Kalani in a sense that you've kind of brought out. But when it comes to it's not working coaching wise, if you bring in a staff like, I made a mistake this year, I got to pivot, you need that. Because otherwise,
Yeah. So to that point, I mentioned that with the defense and obviously his guy, speaking of Elisa, that he didn't really want to cut loose. He did it early on in his tenure on offense, though. Ty Detmer won a Heisman Trophy at BYU. I think any UCLA fan of a certain age remember Ty doing what he did in the early 90s at BYU. He won a Heisman Trophy. BYU hired him to be Kalani's offensive coordinator the first 2 years. Kalani, to his credit, in the second year of his tenure, realized this ain't working and made a decision that, you have some stones to whack a guy who's got some of the goodwill that a guy like Ty Detmer does in Provo, Utah. But he said, I need to make a change. And he cut loose Ty Detmer and brought in Jeff Grimes and Aaron Roderick. And it proved to be the right decision. So yes, as I mentioned, it can be that he can be too loyal to certain people to a fault, but there's also a part of him, as I mentioned, that can be cutthroat because, as I mentioned, when he fired Ty Detmer, a lot of Cougar fans are saying, what in the heck are you doing?
But, it's worked out for the better, that it looks like.
Yeah.
And they've been a contender. They've handled the drama, the off-the-scenes, I don't know about scandal's the right word, but just with Jake Retzlaff, how it's all played out. And here they are, still on the other side, competing and doing it well.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing is this realistic? Is he the right hire? We can kind of analyze that first. Would he make sense at UCLA? And then we'll kind of dive into the realistic, this is kind of weird, and see if that makes sense. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Because Mazda delivers the confidence with every ride. With more IIHS top safety picks and awards than anybody else, from footwork to breathwork, athletes, they sweat the details, and Mazda brings the same attention to how they craft every model, from the safety to the cool factor, everything with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV you can drive with confidence through almost any season. And like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make your every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What you've been waiting all episode for. Is this a good hire and a good fit first, and is it realistic? I think we clearly have some ideas about the second question, but the first one, could this work? Take away all the alum factor, the monetary stuff. If he was, say, moving from a group of five, right? If this was old school BYU just a decade ago, would this be a good fit and the right guy for UCLA to hire right now?
I would say so, yes, absolutely. Because here's the thing, as I mentioned, Kalani, he has learned how to adapt to changing conditions, no matter what it's been at BYU. And in some cases, it felt like he's had one arm tied behind his back in multiple circumstances. All he's done is find ways to make it work in Provo. And with some of the headwinds that UCLA is facing right now, I think that would be a very good thing to have a guy like that who is as resourceful as Kalani is leading their football program.
And is he the type of guy? Because Chip, nobody liked Chip in terms of the UCLA fan base because he wasn't engaging. You're talking about him being very personable. Could he work with just engaging with the fan base? You see the Rose Bowl. It's iconic, but nobody's there. It's like it's a Tuesday and there's nobody. Could he help engage and bring that up, or is that just not really his personality?
Is there a number higher than 100%, Zach? I assure you that Kalani would embrace UCLA fans. Let's say he were to take this job in theory. He would embrace them. His family tells us all the time that when they go out and about, whether it's to the movies or out in the community, they take two cars because they know Kalani. If Cougar fans want to talk to him, he will talk until they want to stop talking to him. He'll sign every autograph, kiss every baby, he'll shake every hand. He does everything he can to make sure that fans feel valued. And that's something I'm with you. Chip Kelly was not his thing. He just wanted to coach ball. And that at a program like UCLA, as crazy as the distractions are down there in the greater Los Angeles area, you need to have somebody who's willing to sell the program. I can assure UCLA fans, if Kalani Sitake were to be the guy, he would sell the Bruins to everybody that would listen to him.
This feels like if this move did happen, it'd feel like a small version of what USC did with Lincoln Riley, just pulling him from Oklahoma out of nowhere. Of course, this one's been thrown out there, so this is a little different. But USC went out there, grabbed Lincoln Riley, and brought him over. Whenever we think about Lincoln, I talk a lot of trash about him. Many people do, whatever. This would be like, okay, it's not happening. And then if they did that, it would be almost that kind of shocking, where he's kind of set. He's at home, but would he fit the SoCal vibe, or did it just work anyway? I think it's a yes, Jake.
It would fit. I agree. And the one thing I also should mention is Kalani Sitake. He has recruited California, over in Hawaii, the West Coast for years, working as an assistant coach at Utah, Oregon State, and obviously as a head coach at BYU. He knows the recruiting circles that UCLA needs to mine talent out of down there in Southern California. So it's not something he'd be wholly unfamiliar with, because he's got a lot of guys who have come from Southern California and stars. Guys like Tyler Algier, who are playing for the Atlanta Falcons now. He's a kid from Fontana, California, just up the road from UCLA. Right now, one of their star running backs, Sione Moa, he is from Victorville, California. They bring guys, and Bear Bachmeyer, he's from the Temecula area, Vista Murrieta High School down there. they have found so many guys in California that have come to BYU and succeeded. I can assure UCLA fans that he would recruit the hotbeds that they want to be recruited. And that's speaking of Southern California, the West Coast, and out into Hawaii and the Pacific Islands. He would do a really, really good job in that regard.
Now here's the real nitty gritty financially. What's a kind of a larger look at it? Could UCLA get enough for him to leave? Is it worth it for him to leave his alma mater? What's it like, and what's that kind of buyout? What do you know? What is it looking like?
So Kalani got a new contract extension after last season. They went 11-2, obviously won that Alamo Bowl, smashing Coach Prime in Colorado in the process.
It's a perfect time to get a contract extension. That's the peak.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's sitting pretty right now relative to what BYU's ever paid their football coaches. It's the highest contract, as I understand it, in BYU football history, and they have made it a pretty sizable buyout as well. Now, is that insurmountable for UCLA? I wouldn't think so, but I'm telling you,
I'll pause you right there, Jake.
Okay.
If they want to be a real program, it should not be insurmountable.
Fair.
If they want to get in their own way, it will be. That's what I'll say. If it's as insurmountable and it's like within reach, and it's like this much, like just a small tidbit, then they're just getting in their way. But if it's like a large gap, then that is what it is. But continue.
So here's the thing. I think it's going to take something like $10 million annually to get Kalani to even consider leaving Provo, Utah right now. And that seems like an insane amount of money, but I'm telling you, he's got a good thing going in Provo. This is a guy who self-admittedly, he grew up a BYU fan. He was lucky enough to play for Lavelle Edwards, obviously the legend in Provo, Utah, the greatest coach in BYU football history. And he's coaching his alma mater. We've referred to that multiple times. He has got a really, really good thing going at a university he absolutely adores. I think it would take just an obscene amount of money to even get him to even entice him to consider such a move.
Yeah, I was very shocked when I saw, of all the names I've seen, you could almost think Lane Kiffin makes more sense than Kalani in terms of just like, all right, maybe he wants to bounce back. Maybe he wants to go, like it just seems like this was out of left field. Was it out of left field for you?
A little bit, but like I said, Kalani is a guy that people love him, and just knowing BYU's reputation, there are going to be people who are always going to throw him in these coaching searches. I don't care who gets hired or fired this offseason. When these articles come up, I'm fully expecting to see Kalani Sitake's name and a number more of them. And anything west of the Mississippi River, I would guess that his name gets mentioned in those coaching searches, no matter how little I think he's interested in even listening to overtures from other programs.
Virginia Tech, Florida, UCLA. Which of those three would he be most likely to take? Of course, Florida's not open yet, but we would assume if they want to be a real program again, that they would get rid of Billy Napier. Would he go with Virginia Tech? Would he go with UCLA? Or would he go Florida and go SEC? What would he be most likely to take in terms of potential openings and current openings?
If those three, I think with the resources, the reputation, and just the overall prowess, I think he'd pick the Florida Gators. That's where I think he'd go. Now, he's not a guy who's from the Florida area, but he does have a connection to Florida. His wife, a native of the Sunshine State, and that would take him home in a way, because I know he spends at least a week or two a year down there in Florida visiting her hometown. So that'd get him closer to her family, and I'm sure his wife would not object to that.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable for, choosing Florida over UCLA. So here's what I got. This is why I'm diving in. Jake, UCLA fans, everybody watching this. Great hire. I want him. He's on my list. Reasonable. I think it's completely unreasonable. I just don't think that it makes any sense. And if UCLA decide to go make a big hire, I think this would be a solid hire. I just don't think it's based in anything in reality after just seeing what the Athletic put, everything out there that UCLA is kind of a joke right now. It would just be a shocker that they could pull this off. I don't really think it's going to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I just don't see it happening. And that's nothing against UCLA. As I said, I've got mad respect for the Bruins. I've got my wife's family's from Southern California, so there is connections I have to the state down there. UCLA is a proud program. It's got a proud tradition. But in this circumstance, with Kalani being an alum of BYU, and he's got BYU, as I mentioned, on the cusp of potentially challenging for the college football playoff, I just don't see it happening for UCLA and then, quite frankly, anybody else right now.
Yeah, so it'd be a good guy, great hire for somebody. It just doesn't seem like, if this wasn't his alma mater, though, would you think he'd be on the next step out?
I think he would consider it more fully. Absolutely. That's part of the nature of college football. I can never say never, but it would take a pretty incredible offer from
the Godfather offer. It would take the perfect.
Yeah, give him a deal he can't refuse. That would have to be it for him to leave Provo in this circumstance. And like I said, I think it would be a home run hire for UCLA, but I would be absolutely floored if Kalani Sitake were to leave for the Bruins.
Yeah, and I would be absolutely stunned if it happened because we were all shocked. Who? I mean, yeah, but who? So, if we're all thinking the same thing, that is the scoop. That's Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars, the BYU edition. Go check out his show. He's got great stuff. Hey, BYU basketball is going to be very interesting. Hey, we'll talk. Maybe UCLA BYU might tango at sometime in March or April. That would be fun. And hey, maybe UCLA can steal their football coach in the process. Unlikely, but maybe. So that is Jake Hatch. I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxheimer. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Locked On UCLA. I'm Zach signing off saying, go Bruins.